If you ask me, the best cooking videos on YouTube are, surprisingly, these infomercials for infamously high-sodium dehydrated broth products, featuring an over-the-hill British celebrity chef who can barely be bothered to try anymore. Believe it or not, I think there's some great things you can learn about cooking and about life by watching Marco Pierre White half-heartedly smear a steak with a smushed-up bouillon cube while generally making an art of being over it. Being over it is basically my favorite trait in other people, and it's one of my favorite feelings on the occasion that I'm able to experience it. Before I proceed, I want to acknowledge that there is a lot of reason to believe that Marco White is, or at least sometimes can be, a terrible person. And we'll get to that. If you're in the United States, there's a good chance you don't even know who Marco Pierre White is. This is basically the one place in the English-speaking world where Marco Pierre White has not been a major pop culture figure for going on 30 years. He just never seemed to break through here the way his one-time protege Gordon Ramsay did.
Where's the lamb sauce?
Come on, man.
But a lot of people trace the birth of today's global celebrity chef movement to Marco Pierre White. He is arguably patient zero for a phenomenon that I do believe is a plague upon us, but that's a topic for another day. Prior to Marco, cooking was rarely viewed as a high-status profession. Working in the kitchen was basically like working in the laundry. This is something Anthony Bourdain talked and wrote about a lot in his Too Short Life. Bourdain is on record as saying that everything changed for both him and for his trade when these iconic photos by Bob Carlos Clark hit the world in 1990, in particular this one. There he is, Jim Morrison in an apron. A wire-thin jackrabbit of relentless, obstinate culinary perfectionism. The dyslexic child of an alcoholic working-class widower, he was beaten down by the English schooling system that most of us know only from Pink Floyd songs. You have to wonder if it was that chip on White's shoulder that drove him to demand respect as a young chef. To say to the aristocratic twits in his dining room, "I am good enough to walk among you. You will not treat me as an untouchable, to be neither seen nor heard whilst I service your gluttony. I am an artist, and you are merely passing through my gallery." As he clawed his way up the English social ladder that was infamously light on rungs, he seemed to drag his entire lowly profession up with him. Or at least so goes the legend. For what it's worth, I think that interpretation of history may be a bit overblown. Certainly there were high-status celebrity chefs before Marco Pierre White, but none of them were as media-savvy as he was. The footage I've been showing you is from two series about Marco that aired on Britain's ITV circa 1989. To the British media, White was basically their bad boyfriend. They loved him because he was mean to them. Check out this legendary clip.
Lloyd's coming in for lunch. Does he eat at Harvey's a lot?
Yes.
You've become quite friendly with him, haven't you?
Yes.
There's nothing like monosyllabic answers, is there?
No.
There's no point in doing this, Marco.
Well, fine, you can go.
Then there's no...
The door's over there.
No, but if you're not going to cooperate,
You know, all I've got to do is
no...
all I've got to do is make the sauce.
Yeah, but how
That
much?
is what I'm being paid for.
Yeah.
Not being paid for anything else, to make the sauce.
As long as I live, you'll never convince me that was a sincere outburst. I think Marco knew exactly what he was doing, cultivating, or to some extent inventing, the volatile genius persona that Gordon Ramsay would imitate into self-parody.
This is the lamb.
Where's the lamb sauce?
Right here, chef.
What you can also see in these videos is the kind of cuisine that Marco was cooking. The plates that made him the then youngest chef ever to earn the maximum of 3 Michelin stars. The dishes look pretty dated, and some of them are positively Baroque, none more so than this dessert of caramelized pears with honey ice cream. Now, there's the poached pears, then he brulees them, that's nice. About 15,000 garnishes go on the plate. Okay, that's what you did in those days. Little edible dish goes down, ice cream goes in there, and then done, right? Oh, sure, well you gotta have a cherry on top, and then we eat it, right? Okay, well then what the is that sugar bird's nest? Has the phrase gilding the lily ever been more apt? Okay, now fast forward a couple of decades, and this is the Marco that we see making cooking videos for Knorr, the stock cube manufacturer now owned by multinational food and consumer products giant Unilever. This Marco has no time for sugar birds' nests. He has time for exactly two things. His sponsor, this video, by the way, is brought to you by Skillshare. More about them later. And he has time for the food he actually likes. Back in his salad days, Marco took more haute cuisine to bed than most could ever dream of. Now he just wants to settle down with a nice rib of beef and knock out a few Yorkshire puddings. I love this Marco. I love his physique. Not so much fat as swollen with pleasure. He looks like my feet feel when I've had too much wine. I even love how lazy and occasionally just wrong he is. Like, he's got this thing that he says every single time he sautés some onion. Does it every single time.
What I'm doing is I'm cooking them without colour, just to soften them, to remove the water content within them, to remove the acidity, to bring out the natural sweetness. As always, cook your onions to remove the water content, to remove the acidity, to allow the natural sweetness.
He really can't be bothered to come up with a new thing to say about onions. He just busts out that old warhorse every single time. And onions, of course, are not particularly acidic. They have a pH between 5 and 6, like basically most vegetables. What he's talking about is the pungency of onions, which comes from their sulfur compounds, compounds that you can indeed break down by cooking them. This is a broader phenomenon you see among experienced practitioners who are suddenly called upon to be teachers. Practitioners tend to know really well what works. They tend to have not such a good handle on why it works. I mean, here's Marco explaining why you whisk liquid into a roux bit by bit when making a sauce.
You whisk it in to incorporate air into it. By incorporating the air, you break down the starch. You work it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure everything about that explanation is wrong, but the technique works. I just kind of love that he doesn't care whether what he's saying is right, or credible, or coherent, or consistent.
Most people make their shepherd's pie too dry. I like my shepherd's pie quite wet. A lot of people tend to make the mince too wet.
Now, I understand that you might find the false confidence of a high-status man to be infuriating rather than charming. It's especially infuriating in light of Marco's recent interview with the Irish Independent, in which he said that men are better than women in the professional kitchen because, quote, they are not as emotional and they don't take things personally. Yes, that quote was given by this guy.
Clearly agitated, Marco asks the cameras to stop rolling.
Don't take me on this one, please. It's been frozen. I want to know why. It's very simple, isn't it? I don't want to be filmed. Do you understand? Do not film when I say do not film me. Have some respect. Do not push me. I don't think you understand what I am. I control myself very well.
So look, I'm not here to tell you you're wrong if you think MPW is a POS. I am here to say there's something we could all learn from how few f***s he gives about what either of us think of him. And also how such a supremely accomplished chef on this earth could be so unconcerned with impressing anybody with his food anymore. I think the single biggest breakthrough in my own cooking came somewhere around the age of 30, when I stopped trying to cook to impress all the damn time, which, if I'm honest, had maybe been my primary motivation up to that point. I kind of realized that was indeed the most selfish way to cook. Here, I'm not giving you this to give you pleasure or make you feel nourished or nurtured. I am here to make you sit there and be awed by me. Sounds great, doesn't it? These Marco Knorr videos helped me liberate myself and my loved ones from that particularly oppressive prison. And once you're out, you can go on a much more gratifying and still challenging journey of discovering what you and the people around you actually like to eat. And I love how Marco acknowledges that is not necessarily an easy thing to do.
So it's about finding that balance of what you like. It's all about eating. Why should there be a recipe? Why can't it be just feel? A philosophy. It's what I like to eat, taste. If you don't taste your food, you don't know what it's going to be like at the end.
It's what you gotta do. Pour in a little bit, taste it. Put in a little bit more, taste it until you like it. And even then, you might sit down to dinner and be like, this isn't really doing it for me. It takes practice to learn yourself. And really, it's rather like our intimate relationships, right? When you're a kid, you don't really know who you need to be with or what you need from them in order to be fulfilled. What you have is somebody else's idea of what is or is not desirable. It's usually only through a lot of sloppy experimentation that we figure ourselves out enough to get who and what we want. And becoming a person who knows themselves is usually the first step toward becoming the kind of person whom someone else will want. Now, as valuable as these lessons may be, let's say that you want to learn something a little bit more specific and learn it from someone who doesn't have the false confidence of an impossibly high-status man. Might I suggest the sponsor of this video, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands and thousands of classes covering all kinds of creative and entrepreneurial skills. You know, I posted a video last week that I was really happy with because I felt that it demonstrated some progress in my still nascent skills as a cinematographer. I'd barely touched a real camera until a few years ago. But the people who watched this video said they were kind of more impressed with the music, which I had composed myself. This was funny to me because basically all of my formal schooling is in music composition. It's not in journalism or cooking or filmmaking or teaching. But at the risk of exuding precisely the kind of false confidence that I was just decrying, I have a little bit of game in all those areas now, and that's not because I'm just so damn awesome. It's really just because I'm old. Life is long, and if you just don't stop learning, it's amazing how many distinct skills you can amass as the years march on and on. And Skillshare can help you do that. Since we're talking about music, let me recommend the excellent music mixing and mastering classes taught by Young Guru.
Recording used to be sort of a black art because it was passed down by word of mouth. Yes, there's science in it, but the things that make particular engineers special were things that were passed down to them. So that's the complete reason as to why we need to take this information and make it available to the public so that the art form doesn't die.
Sure, you could spend a couple $100 on some software and watch enough free YouTube tutorials to cobble together an understanding of how to use it, but that's not really how most people learn well. That is not a class. Most people learn well in a structured environment, and that's what you get from Skillshare. You get a logical progression, building upon skill upon skill upon skill, what they call scaffolding in education theory. Premium Skillshare membership gives you unlimited access to these courses so you can follow your passions and your curiosity wherever they lead you. At an annual subscription of less than $10 a month, that is a steal compared to all the other ways that you could take a class. And hey, because you watch me, you can follow my link in the description and get 2 months of Skillshare Premium for free. And while I really do kind of love Marco Pierre White, I doubt any of you would want an instructor who would say something as stupid as this.
What I always search for when I'm looking for meat is a coating of fat round the eye of the meat, because that tells you what's in the meat. If there's no fat coating, you might as well eat cardboard.
Yeah, you know what's an even better indication of what's in the meat? Looking what's in the meat, because a steak is definitionally a cross-section of muscle. So if there's no marbling in there, then there's no marbling in there. It doesn't matter what the butcher did or did not trim off of the outside. Marco, go home. Take a stock cube, go to bed.